Welcome to Pattern and Craft. I'm Courtney, and in today's episode, I want to show you not one, not two, not three, but 4 edge stitch options for completing your border on any crochet project that you want just a little bit of a finishing edge on. So the example today is this baby blanket, which I've completed, and I've been going around with this beautiful edge stitch all around, and I'm just about to the end. So I thought it would be fun to show you all of the edge stitches I considered to use. This is the one I'm going with, and this is the 4th one that I will show. I'll put timestamps in the description if you want to just jump straight to this one. And then if you want to see all 4 options that I'm offering today, just go ahead and watch the whole video. So an edge stitch is what I'm doing as the final round on my border. So you'll see that this was joined granny squares. I did join as you go, then I did a border with double crochet, a color switch double crochet, 2 more rounds of double crochet, and then I was ready to do something on the edge, because if you see what it looks like without the edge stitch, it looks fine. You could consider this finished, but I just felt like it needed a little something. You know, you could just end it with your rounds of double crochet. You could even do some more and have a wider border. And this is obviously something you can add to blankets, but it can also be for bags, garments, whatever you want to add a decorative edge to. So initially my thoughts were when I was, oh, I got a hair in there, great. So initially my thoughts were when I was done, I was going to just do 1 round of single crochet to finish. And that is pretty simple. And it could look good because when you have the double crochet, they're a little bit looser, but when you do single crochet, they're a little bit tighter and do kind of create a little bit more of a final, I don't know, just a final look to the project. So for a single crochet border, I don't even know that we need to really do the tutorial, but basically you'd be insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, insert, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, insert, going through both. Actually, you could do, I'm doing both loops of my previous stitch, but if you wanted to, you could do the back loop of your stitch, just only the back loop, and then you would get sort of a little ridge. I don't feel like that would be the best for an edge stitch because when you do that, it can kind of tend to pull the loops a little looser. Like it makes this hole if you don't be really careful with your tension. But if you're careful with your tension, you could do that as well. Just do single crochet into the back loop of the stitches. So basically that would just give you this sort of edge versus this sort of edge. For this is all single crochets through both loops of the previous stitch, and this is all single crochet through the back loop, and then you get this extra little ridge. So there's a couple options that are super basic, but they do sort of make the edge of the border just look a little bit more clean, a little bit more tidy, a little bit more finished. But I was looking for something a little bit more decorative. So my next thought was to go ahead and do something I've done before on my Christmas ornaments. I had done this border stitch before, so I figured it would work. When you do them in a circular pattern, you do that into every stitch, but when you're going on a flat border such as this, you'll go every other stitch. So in every other stitch, we're going to skip a stitch. Into the next stitch, just do 2 single crochets, both into the same stitch. Skip a stitch, 2 single crochets, skip a stitch, 2 single crochets, skip the next stitch, 2 single crochets. I'm doing them into both loops of the previous stitch. Skip the next loop, 2 single crochets. I think you get the pattern now. And when you do this, it's pretty subtle. It's very similar to doing 1 single crochet into every stitch. But this way you get just like this little kind of interest right here, almost like little eyelets every other stitch, but you still get a straight edge. You don't have any kind of bumps or anything going on. You just get a little bit of a more interesting look than a straight single crochet would give you. So that's option number 2. Now option number 3 is very similar to the one I just did, but it's going to give us a little bit more of a wavy edge. So we're going to go ahead and do the same pattern, but with a chain 1 between the 2 single crochets. So next we're going to do the same pattern, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next, but now instead of doing a second single crochet, we are going to do that, but first we're going to chain 1. Then into the same stitch, another single crochet. Then we'll skip a stitch, go to the next one, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet in the same stitch, skip a stitch, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, skip a stitch, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, skip a stitch, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, and you'll pretty much get the pattern by now. But when you do it this way, with that little extra chain 1 in between the 2 single crochets, you get sort of a wavy edge. Just a really slight, almost like a mini fan, or a little very non-bumpy picot almost. So I really like that. That's a really nice little edge stitch, but it wasn't quite what I wanted. It could have been the one that I chose for this blanket. And here you can see the difference between if you have just 2 single crochet, skip a stitch, but no chain 1s, it's a flat edge. And then if you add that little chain 1 in there, you get the little bumpy edge. So I think those are both really nice options as well. You can see that still gives us some sort of an interest to the edge of the garment or the blanket or whatever it is that you're making. And it gives it just a nice little finish. But I really liked this one that I found. I think I found it on a blog. I believe there is a YouTube video as well, so I'll link both of those in the description below. So definitely always check my descriptions. I add extra information, outside links, my socials, all kinds of things in my descriptions for my videos. So always check those out. I'm going to take out the other ones since we just did them for demonstration, and I'm going to continue on with this pattern of the edge stitch that I'm actually using for this blanket. So for this one, it's a little bit more complicated, but if you just break it down and eventually kind of memorize the pattern, it isn't that hard. It just is a little slower than the other options that I've shown so far. So this one I've worked into these 2 stitches. So I'm going to go to the next stitch and I'm going to pull up a loop. Then I'm going to go to the next stitch, pull up a loop. I now have 3 loops on my hook because I started with 1. You generally always start with 1 loop on your hook with crochet. Then I pulled up this loop, then I pulled up this loop in the next stitch, yarn over and pull through all 3. Now yarn over and chain 1, yarn over And now we're going to dive back down, kind of do like a post stitch in a way. So we've yarned over, we have the original loop on our hook, we've yarned over. Now we're gonna go behind the stitch we just made, in between these two, not into the stitches we're working into, but into the little edge stitch that we're making. And we're gonna go between this stitch that already was made and this stitch which we're making now. But we're also going to make sure that this little yarn that came from this stitch that started this next stitch, that we're going behind it. So we're not going to leave it behind, we're going to catch it as we insert our hook, and then we're going to, see, we went in between the two stitches and behind or around this little extra bit of yarn that diagonally joins this stitch and the next one. So we go in between this stitch and that yarn and this stitch. Now we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, and then pull through all 3 loops on our hook to make that little peak. Now I know that's probably confusing, so I'm going to do it again. So we have our loop on our hook. These 2 are worked into, these 2 stitches, so we're going to work into the next stitch. We're going to pull up a loop. Into the next stitch after that, we're going to pull up a loop. Now we've got 3 loops on our hook. We yarn over, we pull through all 3. We chain 1, we yarn over, and now we go between the stitches, making sure we catch this little diagonal yarn, and then we pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3. Back to having 1 loop on our hook. So into the next stitch, pull up a loop, into the next stitch, pull up a loop, pull through all 3. That's basically a single crochet 2 together between these 2 stitches. Chain 1, yarn over. We're kind of doing a half double crochet worked behind the stitch that we just made. And then we're done. So when you make many of these in a row, it's a gorgeous little, almost like a picot type edge stitch. Reminds me kind of like rickrack. It lays very nice and flat. It's a good alternative to the crab stitch or that backwards single crochet stitch. I really like how that looks, but it tends to stretch out the edge of the work. So this is sort of a similar look. Actually, I think it's even more clean and nice looking than those. And it is reversible, so it looks pretty much the same on the back as it looks on the front. So this is a great stitch to know. And this is the one that I'm going to finish my blanket in. I did want to also show you what I do at the corners because it's a little complicated to go around the corner and have it lay flat. So I tried a few different options, and I'm going to show you what option worked best for me in a moment. All right, we've come to our corner of our blanket. So I just wanted to show how we go around the corner. So I have 2 more stitches left to work into, and this little edge stitch does work into 2 stitches. So I'm going to make my last normal edge stitch by pulling up a loop in the next stitch, pull through our 3, chain 1, yarn over, work behind, in between, catch the string, yarn over, pull through 3. If we were just going straight, we would work into the corner as our next thing because we've worked into these 2 stitches. But mathematically, to make it lay flat, we need to work into this last stitch that we already worked into for our first loop that we're pulling up. Now we go into the chain space of the corner and pull up a loop in there. Now we can work our edge stitch as normal. Now we need to make one that's only in the corner. So we made one that's sort of between the corner and the edge. Now we need to make one in the corner only. So we need to pull up a loop in the chain space. But now what happens, because we need to pull up a second loop, we can't. If we pull up another loop, we just get this weird twist around our hook. So what we can do is put the hook through one chain of the chain space, and then you can pull up your loop there. So we worked one into the chain space and one into the chain of the chain space and pulled up our loops in those two spots. Now complete the stitch. So now we have essentially one stitch worked only into the chain two chain space of the corner. Now we want to work another one that's between the next stitch and the corner. So we're going to pull up a loop in the corner chain space again, and then we're going to pull up our next loop in the first edge stitch. So now we have 3 loops on the hook. Complete our stitch. So now we basically did one between the edge and the corner, one in the corner, one between the edge and the corner. Now we can just continue as usual, making our stitches. I'm going to make a few so that you can see that it works out and looks good. And of course it might make a difference if you're stitching differently than me, if you're using different yarns, so adjust it as necessary for your particular tension, your blanket, your yarn. But this is what worked for me. So we can see that that works out nicely. We get a nice continual decorative stitch around the corner, but it also lays flat and doesn't curl up and doesn't get too stretched out either. So those are 4 stitches that you can use to do the edge of your blanket, the edge of a bag, the edge of a coaster, the edge of a sleeve, whatever project it is that you want a little bit more of a nice finish on at the edge. So I hope this was helpful. If you ever use my tutorials and you post on Instagram, I hope you'll tag me at Pattern and Craft. Again, remember to check my description. I have a shop. I have patterns for sale and for free on Ravelry, so definitely check out that link. I will eventually have the pattern for this entire baby blanket. So that would have the 2 different squares that make up the main body of the blanket. It'll mention how to do the joins, how to do the border, and then the 4 options for an edge stitch as a written pattern with photos, stitch charts, written instructions, everything you need if you don't want to just refer to the video. I also have videos on how to make this blanket, and those should be out already. This is just sort of the final step. So check out my videos, check out my Ravelry store. I also sell my patterns on Etsy if you don't like to use Ravelry. I have multiple options for you, so go ahead and check that out. All right, I hope you had a good time learning these 4 stitches. I hope you use one of them. This is not an exhaustive list. There's plenty of other options out there, and I'll probably make more videos like this for more interesting borders and edge stitch options and other things you can do with crochet that make it a little bit more interesting and learn new skills. All right, everyone, see you next time. Happy crafting!